Greetings, greetings, greetings. Great God every day to one and all. This is the UNIA study group dealing with the message to the people, the course of African philosophy. We are on lesson number 21, history of the UNIA. One of the most important studies we've ever conducted. This is a very important study because, as Mr. Garvey said, history is the landmark by which the people are directed into the true course of life. The history of a movement, the history of a nation, the history of a race is the guidepost of that movement's destiny, that nation's destiny, that race's destiny. Now let's go into the subject, history of the UNIA. The Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League was conceived as an organization for the purpose of raising the status of the Negro to national expression and general freedom in the year 1913 during the visit of Marcus Garvey to Europe, after he had completed an adventurous visit to the Central American republics. The concept continued to impress itself upon him until the conceiver was compelled to make it practical during his stay in England during the same period. To make it practical, he sailed from England, foregoing a course of law which he had undertaken for the purpose of a profession. In June of 1914, he sailed from England to Jamaica, British West Indies, his native home. In July of 1914, he got together a group of men and women in the city of Kingston, and there he organized the association. Meetings in the name of the association, UNIA and ACL, were held regularly. Later, he held meetings of the organization at the Collegiate Hall in the central part of the city of Kingston, Jamaica. A group of officers was elected and the organization came into substantial existence. Many meetings were held in different parts of Jamaica in the name of the organization, and it continued to exist in the island as an organization until the year 1916, when the founder sailed for America. On his arrival in America, he visited Tuskegee Institute on an outstanding invitation from the late Dr. Booker T. Washington. At the Institute, he met with the principal, Dr. Robert Russell Moulton, and Professor Emmett J. Scott, the Secretary-Treasurer. He discussed with them the purpose of the organization, which was similar to the present aims and objects of the organization, which have been written into the UNIA Constitution. Mr. Garvey received very little encouragement and left Tuskegee to continue a trip throughout the United States. On his return to New York, he visited Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois at the office of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. He discussed with him the aims and objects of the association and the possibility of organizing the movement in the United States. He was very much discouraged by Dr. Du Bois. He undertook to organize on his own account in Harlem by first speaking on the streets, principally Lenox Avenue, during week evenings and inviting his listeners to attend Sunday meetings at Lafayette Hall at 129th Street and 7th Avenue. The meetings at Lafayette Hall grew rapidly in membership, with occasional overflowing mass meetings held at the Palace Casino at 135th Street and 5th Avenue. After Lafayette Hall became too small to accommodate the growing membership meetings, the Palace Casino was secured for regular mass meetings, and offices were established on the premises above what was then known as the Crescent Theater at 135th Street. From the Crescent Theater building to the Palace Casino, the movement grew with such rapidity that premises were secured at 138th Street between Lenox and 7th Avenue, to be known as Liberty Hall. All of this progress took place within 18 months of the founding of the organization in Harlem, New York. From Liberty Hall, the movement spread all over the United States and all over the world, culminating in the calling and convening of the first International Convention of the Negro Peoples of the World in August 1920 in New York. At that convention, Marcus Garvey was elected President General with 20 other persons making up the Executive Council to help guide the destiny of the organization that had become international. For further information on the history of the UNIA and ACL, read the first and second volumes of the Philosophy and Opinions of Marcus Garvey. How to teach the UNIA. To know what the UNIA is, you must first read its Constitution and Book of Laws from cover to cover. You must also read the literature written by the founder bearing on the activities of the organization. The preamble of the Constitution is vitally important to those who are to interpret its supreme object. Whenever the purpose of the organization is challenged by foes in particular, quote the preamble of the Constitution. This should be done especially when the organization's enemies assail it before a court of law or before governmental authority. The preamble was written especially for the purpose of winning sympathy and support of alien races, where the other objects of the association are being threatened by hostility. The UNIA and ACL was intended as one organization to carry out all the aims and objects of the Constitution, but the laws of the state in which the organization operates separate the functions of friendly and fraternal organizations from those of business organizations. Hence, in the corporation of the name of the association in the state of New York, 1918, the two organizations were incorporated separately. The organizations had to be incorporated as the Universal Negro Improvement Association Incorporated and the African Communities League Incorporated. The UNIA was incorporated as a fraternal organization, and the African Communities League was incorporated as a business organization. But the Convention of 1920 accepted the original idea and linked the two organizations together as the UNIA and ACL to hold the principles that were intended so that the two organizations would not go apart as if they were not related. Whenever the UNIA does business, it will do so as the African Communities League or some other business organization. As evidenced in the corporation of the Black Star Line, the Black Cross Navigation and Trading Company, the Negro Factories Corporation, etc., with all its capital held by the UNIA. No private individuals are intended to own the capital of any of these enterprises, because these enterprises will organize as future ones will be organized only for the purpose of supplying funds by way of profit to the UNIA to carry out its aims and objects as laid out in the Constitution of the UNIA in the interest of the race. All subordinate companies of a business nature must be controlled by the UNIA to enable it to carry out the aims and objects of the UNIA and to comply with the law of the respective states. Membership in the UNIA is divided into two kinds: the active member who joins a division or branch of the association and pays the regular dues according to the Constitution and bylaws of the organization. An active member has claim through his or her division to all benefits. All Negroes are considered ordinary members by the virtue of their race. Charity may be dispensed to ordinary members if it is available and they can prove need. The association is supposed to maintain an interest in every Negro, irrespective of his nationality or his condition, as long as he has not been proved a traitor to the race and outlawed as such. All the properties of the UNIA and associate business corporations, companies, or enterprises are held in trust for the Negro race and the relationship of the race through the active membership in the organization as explained above. The accumulated wealth and property of the organization must be handed down from generation to generation as the property of the Negro race through the UNIA because it is held in trust to be given back to those who need it as the occasion may demand. Always give a receipt for money received in connection with the UNIA. Always keep proper records and always have a duplicate for your protection. If you receive money from people in the name of the organization and do not give a receipt, you can bet they will investigate for the purpose of trapping you. And then your name will be dead if there is any delinquency. When you attend a meeting of the UNIA as a representative, you are to receive money for the parent body. Always let that money be received first on the records of the local division through its officers from whom you are raising it for the parent body for a particular purpose, so that when an account is to be made, the local records will support your report to the parent body. Whenever you visit a division of the organization as an official representative of the parent body, you are then the superior officer. You shall then see that all things are conducted in the proper way in your presence in accordance with the Constitution. When visiting a division, always make your visit profitable, both to the division and to the parent body. Never create a loss or tax on the local division by your visit. Every visit you make to a division should be an opportunity for you to enroll new members for that division and to increase the enthusiasm of the local members for the organization. In planning a visit to a division, whether it is a regular visit or otherwise, always inform the president and the secretary respectively and get them to make the necessary local announcements so as to give you an extraordinary attendance of people and members so that you may have an opportunity to increase the local membership. If your visits are always an asset to the division, they will always invite you outside of your regular visitations to come among them. The expenses of your trip should be well figured out before you make it. Railroad fare to and from, or bus fare to and from, accommodations, etc. Hence, you should see that the meetings are worked up to such magnitude so that when they are held, they will cover the expenses. When you visit a division in your territory, your financial return should not be only from the division, but you should seek to use the time that you are in the community to get support from individuals and to do the work for the association, thereby killing two birds with the same stone. You should always observe the proper form of opening and closing a meeting, as well as the proper form for conducting the meetings of the association. They are as follows. Number one, opening hymn from Greenland Icy's Mountain. Number two, reading of the prayers and the ritual or hymn sheet of the association. When your program is not too crowded and the time for meeting is lengthy, you may go through the whole form of prayers. If there is not sufficient time, read only such parts of the prayers as would enable you to go through the program without length. Three, after the prayers, sing either Shine On Eternal Light or O Africa Awaken, then go into the rest of the program. When you are closing the program, close with the prayers of the association for that purpose and sing the African national anthem. Whenever you object to raise financial assistance or collection for the parent body, is that right? Yeah, okay. Um, for the parent body or for the local division, let the raising of the same come in the middle of the program after your most emphatic speech of the day is delivered, whether it is to be delivered by yourself or somebody else. If you have things to dispose of for the association or others help to get, this must come after the main collection. If you are the person appealing for the collection, you must do so with steady emphasis and a properly worded appeal. This must never be done half-heartedly because it will bring half-hearted results. If you have raised the collection for the parent body at a meeting, see to it that it has been properly accounted for after it is taken up. Make sure that it is not mixed up with the funds of the local division. When visiting a division, you're always the guest of that division. The president presides and then introduces you. If it is a special business meeting where you have been called in to regulate the affairs of the division, you will take the chair as a representative of the parent body and conduct the meeting accordingly and restore order and then hand the meeting back to the president or the responsible officer of the division. When the president has been removed and you have been called in, you may appoint someone temporarily, such as the vice president, to act until you have reported the matter to the parent body and the parent body carries out an appointment. If there happen to be factions in the division, you are called in to straighten out their affairs. Never take up residence at the home of either side. Seek independent lodging until you have disposed of the matter. Otherwise, you will have the prejudice against you for taking sides. Never listen to one side without hearing the other side. Never give a decision on one side without hearing the other side. Always try to pacify. Always try to bring factions together in keeping with the principles of the association. Always try to compromise the factions toward keeping the peace. Whenever you make your official visit to the division as a representative of the parent body, always call for the record. Go through them and see that they are properly kept, and then make a report to the parent body. Whenever you see mistakes that can be corrected, see that they are corrected. Don't allow them to continue. Never allow any division to have individuals owning the property of the division in their names, except in cases where proper documents have been passed, where the organization is not registered, as between the persons and the organization, showing that they are only holding such in trust for the organization. But all this should be discouraged and immediate steps taken to register the organization in the particular state or community so that its property may be held in its name. When property is brought in the name, is bought in the name of the organization, the organization's name must be mentioned, and only the names of the officers of the organization at that time must appear as officers, not as individuals. For instance, Brooklyn Division of the UNIA, John Brown, President, Henry Jones, Secretary. In law, the names are taken as being officers of an organization. Hence, the individuals can make no separate claim on the property as individuals. Should they not continue as officers of the organization, those who then become officers of the organization would have their names substituted as officers. This will not affect the ownership of the property by the organization. Pay careful attention to this so that the association may not be defrauded of its property or its right. Always look out for self-seeking officers and individuals in a division. See to it that they do nothing detrimental to the interests of the organization. Always confine yourself to your designated territory and never go beyond it, except when authorized to do so. Always respect the charter rights of every division, chapter, branch, or affiliated organization. Never use one against the other as long as they are chartered. Have no favorite division except the one that you may be a member of. Always hold on even balance. Always hold an even balance. Always encourage cooperation between the divisions. If a member cannot get along in one division before his membership is lost, advise him to join another division. Whenever there are no divisions or chapters, and there are Negroes in the community, encourage the organizing of a branch, chapter, or division. Over 1,000 Negroes in the community ought to have a division or a chapter. So in a community where you have 200,000 Negroes, you may have many divisions according to the district and location. All 200,000 of those Negroes could belong to one or two divisions. You should approach ministers of the gospel in the community and ask them to organize chapters in their churches of which they will be the president, so as to get their church members to be UNIA members. Do the same with lodges and fraternities. They can also be chapters of the UNIA, even though they are independent lodges and fraternities. Final section, arguments for the continuation, perpetuation, and support of the UNIA. The UNIA's work from 1917 to 1937. Number one, the UNIA has stirred the entire world of Negroes to a consciousness of race pride, which never existed before. Number two, the UNIA broke down the barriers of racial nationality among Negroes and caused American, African, West Indian, Canadian, Australian, South and Central American Negroes to realize they had a common interest. The UNIA has given Negroes throughout the world a program of racial nationalism which never existed before. The association caused all Negroes to recognize their common origin as Africans and their African descent. It had caused all the other races to recognize the national aspirations of the Negro. It placed the Negro's cause before the League of Nations and the Versailles Peace Conference. It placed the national aspirations of the Negro before the Disarmament Conference in Washington in 1924. The UNIA caused the French, English, and other European governments with colonies in Africa and the West Indies to extend greater privileges to the native race and to offer them more secure positions in their respective civil service, diplomatic service, and political life of the country. 8, Negro justices, magistrates, and heads of government departments were appointed because of the activities of the UNIA in different countries. 9, the economic status of the Negro was raised in different countries because of the association. 10, the association taught the Negro how to go into big business. 11, it taught the Negro how to secure his own business enterprises through which tens of thousands of Negroes' businesses have been started all over the world. 12, it taught Negroes how to support their own professional men, doctors, lawyers, etc. 13, excuse me, the UNIA taught the Negro how to support his own church. 14, it taught the Negro how to use his political power from which he has benefited in the United States, the West Indies, Africa, and other countries. 15. The UNIA gave the Negro a national flag and a national hymn. 16. It caused the other races to spell the word Negro with a capital N. 17. It taught Negroes self-respect for their race. 18. It brought courage to the Negro race throughout the world. 19. It caused the Negro to search for a new type of leadership. 20. It taught the Negro preparedness against adversity. 21. It has been the most outstanding Negro organization throughout the world. 22. It is the most recognized international organization among Negroes. 23. It is known in all parts of the world. 24. It has taught the Negro to follow only Negro leadership. 25. It has saved the Negro from the hypocritical, dishonest leadership of other people, which has never brought the Negro any good results. 26. It taught the Negro that the cats don't lead the rats, nor the lions the sheep, nor the wolves the foxes, and so Negroes should lead Negroes. 27. The UNIA has taught the Negro to never rely upon the sweet-sounding words and promises of others, but to rely on his words and his own promises if he is to be led safely. 28. It has taught the Negro to believe in himself and not to believe that what another man seeks for him, he is going to give away freely. 29. It has taught the Negro to have his own labor organizations and not to expect other laborers who are competing with him for the same employment to give honest leadership for him to compete with them for the same job. 30. It is the only organization that has given the Negro an Negro 31. It gave the Negro press a broader point of view. 32. It has kept the Negro from going red for the convenience of others. 33. In 20 years, the UNIA changed the attitude of the Negro and set him on the way to a new hope. Finally, 34. One of the fundamental desires of the UNIA is to approach every Negro with the attitude of friendship, brotherhood, and sympathy. Therefore, every representative of the association must adopt an attitude that works to bring about the realization of such a desire. And that concludes that portion of the chapter that we're dealing with today, which was definitely a powerful read. We'll pick up next week with the continuation of that chapter on the history of the UNIA. Somebody talk to me. What you think? What you think?
Yes, sir. Thank you for the great reading. When you was reading the the Google books that I was using, it didn't complete the whole of the lesson. So, for those that are home watching, that's why you only got up to 18, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, sir. Yes,
Yeah,
sir. You know,
yeah, yeah. That lesson is a serious blessing to have. And I was and welcome President Hargrove from Atlanta Division on the call with us here.
Greetings, brother President General. How you doing?
Perfect, if not better. Thanks. Thanks. You can extend greetings to Sister Nyasha, Sister Lee, and Commissioner Majaliwa, if you like.
Greetings, family.
yes,
It's an
sir.
Greetings, family.
honor to
Welcome,
be here.
welcome.
Yeah. I was talking to the President Hargrove earlier and talking about this lesson and how powerful it is, and you know, to the way it's structured to give us everything that we need and to guide us. It's almost like an orientation.
Okay.
It's a way of Mr. Garvey making sure that if for some reason this great association of ours, the greatest movement for improvement that ever existed, were somehow in a position to collapse or disappear, that someone based just on this lesson alone could reconstruct everything they need from the Constitution, from the certain other sections that he's going to recommend in part two. But everything we need to have a regular business meeting to start conducting and operating a local division and to start, spreading and organizing and recruiting and, how to handle the resources, etc. All of it's kind of packaged in there along with the history you need to understand how this association developed, even including, him talking about the conceptual birth of the UNIA in 1913, which I thought was kind of fascinating because that came even before his epiphany with Booker T. Washington in 1914, which some people think was the spark that initiated the idea for the movement. But no, it didn't initiate the idea, but it did kind of encourage a particular approach that Mr. Garvey wanted to develop in building a school in Jamaica that was similar to a Tuskegee school that was in the U.S. So it was an important moment, but yeah, conceptually the UNIA was something he was coming up with, even without the name of the organization or the program totally laid out back in 1913. So I thought that was an important piece of information, along with some other information about his. I mean, many of us don't know that he actually was planning on coming to the U.S. in 1915 to meet with Booker T. Unfortunately, Booker T died, so he wound up postponing his trip and coming, later on. But all these things were, the dates and the timing of his pilgrimage to the U.S. were all important factors in when and how the organization was built and, what he encountered when he visited. All those are important because, we're still encountering some of the same things today. And it gives us a idea of what our founder had went through. And he was raised in this university, Atlanta University, in the United States of America. And so he encountered a lot of opposition when he went to Tuskegee. We know that, Robert Russell Moulton at the time was an informant for the Bureau of Information of Investigation. We know that, Emmett J. Scott was working for the War Department as an adjutant general for the War Department. W.B. Du Bois had just um, started planning to be a captain in the U.S. military intelligence at that time, so he was working with the government. And, shortly afterwards in 1918, that's when he put together his, he was temporarily a captain in U.S. military intelligence working with Spingarn, so anyway, there was opposition from all over to somebody coming here and putting together a program that doesn't depend on white patronage or white philanthropy in order to operate. And so everywhere he went, all he saw was these colored intellectuals, and by colored I mean mostly mixed race, barely any signs of their blackness. People who actually prided themselves on their complexion. Is the closer they were to white, the more perfect they thought they became. And so the attitude toward this Jamaican dark-skinned man coming to putting a race program together was pretty stiff. Yet, despite all the opposition, he didn't come there for their permission. He came there to share the good news that he had. So with the right attitude, he met more and more people who were receptive, who understood the program, and they jumped on board and helped build this thing and breakneck speed. So anyway, it's a lot into the history of the organization that I can go into further, but I allow somebody else opportunity to say a word if they like.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I would just like to add that the Honorable Marcus Garvey put everything in place that they no stone, as they say, was left unturned. Everything is there for us. If we had the numbers that we need to do the work, we got no excuses. Everything is there. He spoke about when divisions are, going through, tribulations, how we should operate, how we should run our services or our meetings, how property should be bought so that, it keeps away theft in our community, giving people receipts for when we take money. Also, that helps with character as well, because people need to be, need to trust. We need to trust each other. So, if you're taking money from people and you're not giving a receipt, you could easily say you never received that money. How can you prove that you received this money from the brother or the sister, or how can the brother or sister prove that she gave this money? So I think that the UNIA constitution and the history in general is well thought out. I still marvel at the brilliance of Marcus Messiah Garvey. How he could think. I know he wasn't alone in doing so. There was some strong brothers and sisters around him, but I just marvel at his intelligence and how he knew what he knew. Because even today, if we look at some of the organizations that are starting off, trying to organize in the community, they haven't really got a clue on what to do, and we can see that because they don't stay around long. There's in-house fighting, there's things happen, they don't maintain. We know that the government of well, not even the government of the United States, the colonial powers around the world, pull together to take down this one man and this great organization, this fraternity, of bringing all African people under one banner. So I think that just hearing you read it and reading this chapter, those are the things that stand out to me. The structure, the unison of all of our people around the world. This is how we function, similar to religious people like Islam. They have a way that they do with their prayer. It's the same anywhere you go, other than maybe the Nation of Islam. They kind of differ in the structure of prayer in historically, but I just find that quite interesting to see how he knew this is how we need to progress. On so many different levels. He talks about the businesses, how we should structure the businesses, whose name things should go in. It shouldn't go in anybody's name. Things should go in the name of the organization. And we spoke prior in a different chapter where he was talking about that the works that we do today is for the unborn black children. The money that's raised should be passed on to the next generation, so future generations can benefit from the work that we're doing today. And the only way that we can do that is if we put things in the names of organizations and not in the names of people, because we all know that when people die or transcend, the wealth normally goes to the family, and sometimes the family don't agree with the principles that the father had or the mother had. So then they're gonna maybe sell out the property. They're gonna use the money for their own benefits and things of that nature. So I find that quite that's just the wisest thing for organization to do, is to put things in like a trust. That's kind of what Garvey was saying. We put things in trust in the organization that the future generations can benefit from this work. But yeah, I yield on that if anybody else wants to veggie bank off of that. And we have another brother that just entered the chat as well. Welcome, my brother.
Yeah, brother Zekaway, budding young author, brother who brought me into the UNIA. But he's also the author of "Emancipate Yourself from Mental Slavery," a collection of quotes from Marcus Garvey,
Yes.
as well as "Melanin's Worth More Than Gold." But he can introduce himself. That's my teacher there, brother Zekaway.
Well, you just introduced me. I don't know if I'd introduce myself as your teacher. We were students together.
Yeah, yeah. We cut our teeth studying this history.
Like what you exactly. Um, there's some people who don't. They talk about the history of the UNIA and Marcus Garvey like they went to school for Marcus Garvey, and they talk about things that anybody can talk about. But there's some things that only people who are members of the UNIA can talk about. And those are things like how do you start a meeting of the UNIA? Very simple, basic thing that had to have happened thousands of times. But you never hear anybody talk about that because you can only talk about it if you've experienced it. It's not something that you read about in a book. You know, you don't, you even, if you look at Marcus Garvey's FBI file, they just give you, they tell you that it happened, but they don't tell you what happened, right? They tell you that the meeting opened, but they don't tell you what made you know that the meeting was open. And to me, it's a very important thing because from what I've seen in my experience, it's therapeutic. If you look at how you had people who were, say, for instance, 1918, you had the lynching of Mary Turner, right? Nobody was saying, we need to look out for the mental health of African Americans, right? When that happened, it was just something that was reported in the news as a fact. How it affected my grandparents and great grandparents, community, nobody really cared. But and even it went so far as when Woodrow Wilson talked about it in July of that year, he gave us a name. So these are the types of things that I believe that the rituals of the UNIA were intended to address. Even when we look at what we know as the chaplain's prayer, we really don't even know. We know John Edward Bruce wrote the chaplain's prayer. That was it something that he heard growing up as a child? We really don't know. But when you look at the chaplain's prayer, that
kind of going in and out too for some reason.
Okay.
But you keep talking. Mm-hmm.
We have needs we don't even know we have. And if you look at that prayer, it's like nobody, you don't hear people talk about the prayer. And it really needs to be studied. What was John Edward Bruce talking about when he said, the God of the right? And when we say these prayers, are the prayers being answered? And how do we know if they're being answered? Right? When they talk about spreading confusion ever o'er the advocates of might. I see that every day. I see confusion everywhere you look. And I think that these prayers are being answered. But if, let's say we have 1 million, because we have the Millions for Marcus Garvey Facebook group. Let's say we have 1 million people saying that prayer together. If there's a God, do you think that God will answer? Do you think that God will respond to 1 million people making the same prayer at the same time? I think they will. And I think that's where the power of the UNIA really originated, in the rituals. Because in a speech that Marcus Garvey gave during 1920 in the run-up to the first convention, he called the UNIA a community of the mind. And we can't be a community of the mind if we're not acting like a community of the mind. And there are people who are doing things deliberately and intentionally to keep us from being a community of the mind. And if we're going to be a community of the mind like it was back in 1920, we have to do the things that they were doing back then. And to me, one of the main things that we do is open and close a meeting the exact same way they did.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Honor that age-old tradition. We want what they had. We got to do what they did. And nothing is more encouraging to see in the Negro world reports of, for me in Washington, D.C., reports of the Washington Division number 183 hosting a monster mass meeting at this location and that location and opening up, with the prayer. And this young man comes and does the ritual. And these folks are shouting the anthem. And it transports you back to a time and place where we were blessed to do more with less, and we were able to accomplish great things, in our the communities, because we worked the program and followed, the leadership of Mr. Garvey. And so to recount that and see that and understand the power of that, because we're still, practicing the same things today. It's definitely encouraging. It's inspiring, and makes our aspirations a little higher, knowing if he did it, we can do it. He was considered himself an ordinary man with extraordinary conviction, and so we consider ourselves people who can also have that extraordinary conviction if we um, adopt the same lessons and the same philosophy and program and attitude, disposition that he had. We can accomplish the same thing he was able to accomplish. It. So it's definitely a powerful lesson to look at history. I know Dr. Khaled used to say that history is like in the laboratory of life. He used to say that every experiment is a success, even if it teaches you what not to do again. But in this laboratory that we have, that we're looking at, and we're seeing all the great, successful and audacious ideas and businesses and universities and hotels, and grocery stores, and I mean, every month there was a new business popping up throughout Harlem. They had, so many factories for dolls and clothing line, textiles, etc. The industry was going, out of this world, despite the fact that you had all these entities, these rival organizations, bad mouthing and trying to discourage people from getting on the ships, talking about they were raggedy and wooden and they're gonna die if they get on them. Despite the fact that you got people like the boys telling America that Marcus Garvey went to kill all white people and trying to discourage them from joining. And despite the fact you got all these people trying to infiltrate and turn people against one another, spreading lies and rumors, throwing, foreign objects in their ship's engines and all kinds of stuff. Despite all this crap, even with the lawyers in the Black Star Line trial, that it shouldn't never have happened in the first place. All this, they were trying to encourage some of Mr. Garvey's own attorneys. They were giving them, offering them, positions as assistant to the U.S. State's attorney in their different regions if they get him to cop a plea that he was, certainly not guilty of, but come out before the world and say he was guilty of something he didn't. And he kept refusing and refusing, et cetera. But despite all of this opposition coming from all over the place, Mr. Garvey got hit in Detroit with a stone. They actually stoned him. He got shot in New York, in his head and his legs. He got, thrown in jail every chance they could get for any excuse they could find. He got exiled out the country and eventually deported in prison. I mean, this man was facing opposition that many other people would have stopped, early on and said, "Man, that's it. I'm done. It's too much for me." But he never stopped. Never even thought about stopping because he understood that, as he said once before, talking about history. After he got out of prison, before he got out of prison, actually, it was the last message from prison. He said that the first chapter in the history of the UNIA is written, and I'm about to open the second chapter in the urge toward African nationalism. And he said he was going to utilize the tremendous odds of righteousness because he knew history was on his side. He understood what our ancestors had went through and what greatness we came from and what greatness we were capable of coming back to. But that's how he utilized our history, not to live in the past, but to learn from the past. And so, if we understand the greatness that he was able to accomplish in this day and time, we too can accomplish that kind of greatness again. So, I mean, this is one of the blessings of this lesson is that, it's not showing excuses. It's showing what can be done, what has been done, and exactly step by step how to do it. So we messed this one up. Who do we to blame?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Nobody is to be blamed but ourselves. We don't really have no excuses for failure in this time to liberate the minds and the bodies of our people in 2025 or 2030 or whatever. We have the black print or the blueprint You know, the history of the UNIA, the legacy of the UNIA speaks for itself. It's the largest organizational body of black people ever in the history of our people. And like I said, like I always say, it's the only organization that included all African people, no matter where you found yourself, or no matter what language you spoke, or how you spoke the English language. You know, look at us on this YouTube today. You have some brothers in America. You have some brothers in London, and sister in London. You know, people listening from all over the world. It's a testament to that teaching of the UNIA, of Garvey. You know, Garvey can. I always say Garvey can make all of us giants if we follow this teaching. You know, he's not gonna make boys. He makes men and women. I always know when I meet a Garveyite, not because he says he's a Garveyite, because anybody can say they're a Garveyite. Their works, the way they conduct themselves, the way they act. I know, okay, he studied, he's a student of the Honorable Marcus Garvey. You know, Garvey's told us how important character is. And when I look at the members of we could say the first resurrection then, in the 1920s or the early 1990s of the UNIA, when we look at some of the people that was in there, the elder, mentioned Mr. Bruce, mentioning where did he find those words from? How profound are those words? You had some brilliant people, some excellent brothers and sisters, Harrietta Davis, for example, another one. I know these are, people that people always talk about. I always encourage the President General to tell us about those that most people don't know. The heroes and the sheroes that, are only known within the UNIA, as the elder was saying, that you got to be inside the UNIA to know some of these secrets, because they're not being taught amongst the mass of our people. So it's very important that we take pride in what we're doing as organizing. We add on to this rich history, or her story, that we don't pollute it, because if we pollute it, then what kind of men are we or women are we to say we're Garveyites and still act like we're still sleeping? Garvey is got us a people that is awake and active. Our President General always has a saying, he's on the case for the race. We're on the case for the race. And you unmuted, President General, so go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, well, I thought you were finished at one point, but yeah, I was going to say thank you for saying that about our history, to get it right, not polluted. Too often, I see people who I know love the Most Honorable Marcus Garvey, the philosophy, the program, that hard, Garveyite to the bone, or to the marrow, as one of my elders used to say. Not a Prempe. He used to always say he was Garvey born, Garvey bred. When he dies, he'll be Garvey dead. And so when Prempe started talking about this history, we used to talk about people getting it right, particularly the UNIA members. And if you look at most of the books written on Marcus Garvey, most of them are horribly inaccurate. And I said most of them, not some, not a few. But if I had to stack up 100 books in my library on the Garvey movement, I probably couldn't recommend no more than 4 or 5 at the best, because most of them are going to be misleading. So, I mean, most of us who think we know the history and having a clue about the true history of the UNIA, because it's told mostly from people who don't care and don't know, and don't care if they got it wrong. They'll put anything in those books, and most of the information is from rival groups of the organization, or the FBI reports, or some other ridiculous source that's not telling the whole story. And many of the people in Africa, as you had mentioned earlier, Brother Commissioner, uh, many of the leading scholars, over, the Zikaways, the Nkrumahs, the Jomos, all these, folks who became founding presidents of some of these independent nations, as well as some of their leading officers, in Nigeria, like Bono Chike, like definitely don't go for South Africa. There's tons that were in the ANC who initially began as UNIA division, all around the globe, from Nyansaland, as it was known back at that time, to Rhodesia, as it was known back at the time. Some of these places where the people were getting the Negro world imported in illegally because it was under ban. They were sparking the ideas in their head about international, global, unified race of people coming together, and not just uh, fighting for some civil rights, but declaring their rights. Free people declare their rights. Slaves beg for the master to give them some rights that they came up with. But we had our own set of rights. We had our own flag. And as men, when men stand up, boys sit down. As he was saying earlier, Garvey wasn't raising a bunch of boys. He was bringing up a army of strong men who had no excuse for being anything but men, and women as well. Being strong sisters and women who were leaders. Who were leading. Like the Honorable Lady Henrietta Ben Davis, who Lady Commander ordered it now, was part of her title conferred upon her. But she was director of the Black Cross Trade Navigation. She came up with the Black Cross nurses. She was a leading personality traveling with Mr. Garvey back in the day, even before Mr. Garvey was even, popularly known at that time. She would travel and speak on platforms with him, and she was far more famous than him. It's like I tell folks sometimes, it's like me and Halle Berry going on stage together somewhere. People may have heard of me, but they know Halle Berry, and that's the reason they coming. To have someone of that international, reputation traveling the world with Mr. Garvey, and she's one of the greatest elocutionists in the world, means he's doing something right. She and he both had an idea of sparking an industrial revolution in Jamaica, and forming an industrial school, one for girls and one for boys back in 1910s, in Jamaica, so they both were on the same life path. They both had some background, him with the United Fruit Company, and she, Henrietta's father was working with shipping industry, so when the idea of starting a shipping line came together, you had the right people coming together. That first 13 people in New York, 18 months later, had millions of people all over the globe. Started with 13 people. And we got half of that on the call right now. So what would it take for us to follow the plan that's already laid out for us? The perfect recipe. Every measure of exactly what to put into this formula to come out with success is written right there. What will it take us 18 months from now? Where will we be? That's a testimony of whether we really practicing this thing or we just playing with this thing. Yeah, this is really exciting for me to read and see the step by step. This is like a what they call it. The Europeans call it the Aristotelian logic, where you got your premises developed and it comes to the logical conclusion. This here is a formula for the rationalism of Black nationalism. This is a step by step guide to how to erect the African world empire and to have us back on the top and other folks, do whatever they do. but we need to be in control of our destiny, and this is definitely again an example of a time where we were solidly in control of our destiny all over the globe, and not just some pockets here and there that the Europeans or other groups can come and isolate and separate us and attack us like they did in Tulsa, like they did in Rosewood, et cetera, and other places around the globe. When we started locking arms internationally and globally, boy, they were scared to death. It took every last ounce of power and strength and deceit amongst our own, et cetera, in the world to try to stymie this movement. And we still wind up contributing to the Harlem Renaissance. We still contributed to the rise of the African independence movement and the Black Power movement. We still en route to secure a true Africa for the Africans once again, as the Sahel states and others are basically reviving on that same African nationalist spirit that Mr. Garvey initiated many, many years ago. To a level where he, I would say, perfected African nationalism. I mean, others had practiced a degree of it before, but none of them perfected it on the level that Mr. Garvey did. That's the perfecter of our faith. So, anyway, I ain't gonna talk a hole in your head, but yeah, I'm just happy to be on this calling and talking about this subject. On and then there's a section on how to teach the UNIA. That's definitely a powerful section in and of itself that we haven't even really gotten into yet about the preambles and how the organization was founded, etc.
Yes, sir. You mentioned Dr. Khaled, yeah, and Dr. Khaled always used to say that we have to be committed to our commitments. I think that this is what we're lacking today, is being committed to our commitments. You mentioned, they started with 13 people and look at what they done. You had 13 people committed to what they said they was gonna do. A lot of the time, we're only committed to the things that don't bring us nothing. We're committed to going to the parties, the dance. We're committed to going to the nail shops, the salons, the barber shops, etc., etc. But we're not committed to our liberation. This is what I think the problem is now. That people need to be committed to what they say they're gonna be committed to. That's how we're gonna get the results that we want. That's how we're gonna change the conditions of our people, by saying something, not just saying something, by doing what we say, by leading by example. This is what we need to be doing. And I think that if brothers and sisters around the world say something and live to what they say, there will be a better day. I see you unmuted and muted yourself again, President General. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, no, I was going to say something, but I was thinking too that I like to hear what I see Sister Nyasha still here and President Hargrove. Just want to hear what they thought about the lesson and what they got out of the reading part. If they got a second to speak.
Yeah, it was kind of in the background for me, so I do apologize. That's why I've been a bit quiet. I did pick up the parts about receipts and us being accountable, and I think that's very important. The one thing I must say that it made me think about was the fact that Marcus Garvey went to prison for mail fraud. Mail fraud, of all the things that they tried to catch him on, they got him on mail fraud, which wasn't still a thing, as we now know, or it has now been proven. But it made me just think that this was a man who wrote about keeping receipts, keeping ledger, keeping accountability to all of us as an organization, so that you can't end up in a position with mail fraud, but yet they still managed to pin mail fraud on him, which is ironic. So he wasn't trying to be a hypocrite in any way. They were just out to get him. And I also wanted just to comment on what Brother Minister or Commissioner just said in terms of accountability in the community as well, because one kind of leads into the other, which I definitely agree with. But I just think that also it's about being able to focus on what's really important and not just an individual or a group of things. It's like, what can we do to actually uplift our people as a whole, as opposed to, focusing on a particular area or a particular thing? What can we do? This is why the UNIA is here, so that we can work together as Black people to uplift one another and literally just ignore. When I say ignore, I mean filter out the trash, so that it doesn't infiltrate the importance of what we're here to do and what we need to do. Because, we've got other organizations that are rising. I'm going to say, for example, the NAACP. Like, I don't understand why they get more credit for what they do as opposed to what we do. We are a complete African organization. They are not. And unfortunately, because they are not, they get that recognition. But from my perspective, we should have that recognition, because we're the ones that have always been race first, Africa for the Africans, etc. And I feel that that's most important. So, it's like going back to Message of the People. It's, Brother Miss is always saying, it's like a Bible. It's like we have our Black man's flag. This is our Black man's Bible. We need to be able to pull in those different resources so we can focus on what's important, keep each other accountable. It doesn't mean we don't keep each other accountable, but those people that are bringing the community down, or organizations, yes, they must be filtered out. They must be filtered out to the point where we no longer hear that as noise to distract us on the path than what we need to be on or go forward on. I hope that makes sense.
Yes,
Yeah,
my
absolutely.
yes, my sister. Powerful words.
Yeah. Pre- yeah, sir. President Al Hargrove.
Yes. Thank you, Brother President General. Um, this is a very deep lesson. Word that comes to my mind is comprehensive. And it echoes the entire lessons themselves, which can be considered comprehensive. Um, this lesson 21 as well as lesson 22, when we're reading them in the lessons and the classes we've done in the past years, we've seen and we've noticed how the energy of the class and the students change once we get to this lesson. The previous lessons and all of the lessons are to a level empowering, enlightening, expanding our thought process. When we get to lesson 21, Mr. Garvey is very clear in what he's communicating, starting out with the history of the UNIA, but I would argue the later portion of this lesson talks about the future of the UNIA. And some of the brothers, and I believe the sister may have mentioned earlier, the word excuses. And that's what this entire text, particularly this lesson, removes any form of excuses that we think we have as we claim this title of leadership in the UNIA. And again, we should know this text was written specifically for the leaders of the UNIA to carry on the work after Mr. Garvey's transition. So this is the recipe that Mr. Garvey is giving us as to how we will rebuild this great organization of the UNIA. Foundation being, as I would say, the Constitution. But as we're going out and we're promoting the UNIA, we must know the history. We must know not only the history of the UNIA, but I would also argue the history of Mr. Garvey. 1887 to 1940, founding the UNIA in Jamaica in 1914, traveling to the United States in 1916. As the text said, the first international convention, 1920. These are things that we have to be able to articulate as we're going around promoting the UNIA. People are going to want to know what we know about this great association, which is over 100 years old. So Mr. Garvey equips us initially with that foundation of some history, obviously not complete history, and then he touches on how to teach the UNIA Constitution, which is a small section, but it's a lot of information being communicated in those very few chapters, as President General Moriamal touched on the preamble. And preamble is just one section of the Constitution. We could spend, just as much time as we spent on the message to the people can be spent on studying the Constitution itself. So empowering us with that foundation and that knowledge as we're going out and rebuilding. And then Mr. Garvey even touched on several points that we could use to encourage our brothers and sisters as to why they should still support the UNIA. A very long list, and those are some things that we should commit to memory. Obviously, instilling pride in our people, promoting for us to buy black, be black, buy black, think black, promoting for us to encourage and support leadership that looks like us. Obviously, capitalization of the word Negro. All of these things are things that, again, as we're promoting, as we're having meetings and gatherings for the UNIA, these are the tools of encouragement that we're using. And again, close it out, as the brother has said earlier, the format of our meetings, so that's really, again, there's no excuse as to what we should be doing and how we should be doing it. It's very clear. It's just up for us to, carry on that work. So with that, I'll close out. Thank you, Brother Moyama.
Oh, thank you, my brother. Yeah, that was a perfect summation. Definitely the to think black, act black, buy black, or put it back. That's the attitude we need to have. And I was appreciating Sister Nyasha talking about the Mr. Garvey's being the most transparent, meticulous, detailed person when it came to conducting business and operating and getting receipts and checks and balances on everything, so that the system operates well in his presence or outside of his presence. And yet they're trying to find some ridiculous, trumped up charge of conspiracy to commit mail fraud, and everybody in this conspiracy was found innocent but him. So he's convicted of a one-man conspiracy charge to commit mail fraud from a crime that happened when he wasn't even in the country. It's kind of a ridiculous conviction, and maybe it's the ridiculousness of it that they wanted to use against him to show that they can do anything because they got the power. But might don't make right, So in the end, they had to wind up paying just recently by having to be told by the president of the United States that they were dead wrong, and that this was a false conviction and charge. So I'm glad that came about. But the thing about Mr. Garvey once said that they tried to call me crooked because I'm honest and didn't fall for the methods of corruption. But if I am crooked, then I shall present them their history that even the devil would be ashamed of, because they got nerve to talk about somebody's history. Remind me when Farrakhan was on the Mike Wallace show one time, and Mike Wallace talking about how corrupt Nigeria was. And Farrakhan took him to town on that one. Said, I know you're not calling nobody corrupt. This is the most corrupt country on the planet. This is the most, evil country on the planet. No one has dropped bombs on people by, 50,000 people in Nagasaki and Hiroshima. No one enslaved people by the hundreds of thousands in mass like America did, on the level of butchery and hangering and, all this kind of nonsense. I got nerve to talk about Nigeria or some other country is only a few years old, thanks to their colonization and enslavement, all these Europeans. They got nerve to talk about somebody else, like they don't know, like we don't know their history. So knowing our history protects us, but it also exposes them at the same time. So, and we need to understand and appreciate and utilize this history to our benefit. And you definitely can, it really energizes me, when I see these things and I see what should not have been possible to be done. It's something that these Europeans really counted openly counted on us being enslaved for thousands of years. They thought we'd never get out of this bag here, even when they did what they call the reconstruction of slavery. They thought, oh yeah, we're just not gonna call them slaves anymore. We call them minimum wage earners or sharecroppers or some other name, and that should be enough to make them think they're free without actually giving them any the tenets of freedom. And we'll just make them second class citizens. Say, okay, we made some progress, but that's not progress. As Malcolm was saying, you can stick a knife in my back 9 inches, pull it out 3, and call that progress. That's not progress. You pull it all the way out, that's not progress. The progress when you can start addressing and healing the wound that the blow inflicted. So, but that's another story dealing with that reparations issue. But certainly, yeah, the UNIA's roadmap is is beautiful. Is perfect. It has worked, and it definitely can, and still is working if we apply it. Only if we apply it. And many of us think sometimes we got a better mousetrap idea. There's been many groups to try to break off from the UNIA and start other stuff, but none of them succeeded. None of them accomplished anything near what we are able to accomplish under the same plan that we're utilizing today. And nothing ever will, because this was the perfect formula, the perfect amalgamation of the universal principles of African nationalism, all boiled into one. And so, again, if we want what we had, we got to do what we did. So yeah, it's just about applying these things. You can't fake Garveyism. You gotta take the steps one by one. A lot of people think they can hang around Garveyites and therefore they are Garveyites. But nah, you can't hang around. It's not osmosis. You got to practice and study and apply these principles. So knowing Garveyites don't make you a Garveyite any more than knowing a doctor makes you a doctor. Same thing with reading a little bit of Garveyism alone is not enough if you're not applying it. Just like reading the law book don't make you no lawyer. When you start to practice law and start practicing medicine, that you actually become a practitioner or a doctor or a lawyer. But a lot of times we think, we come with some half-baked idea, or we just want to change the word on this, or it's about the cultural name change and this and that. That's going to fix all our problems. But if culture would have fixed our problems, we would have never got kidnapped and brought here in the first place. We had all the culture in the world back on the continent when the Europeans first invaded. But culture didn't save us. We were still caught up in some tribalism and some other things. But culture alone is not enough. We need a certain philosophy that's race oriented, that's race first. It unites us. They came as a race and we came as tribes. And that policy didn't work too well. So now that we coming back with a new understanding of their plan, that we know how to respond with equal force. And now we have a roadmap that they can't stop. They never could stop. The only way they could destroy us is if we destroy ourselves. They're not big enough to be our worst enemy. That's why Mr. Garvey said this organization is our greatest enemy. We're coming together through the organization of the UNIA is our greatest tool and weapon to restore order to this planet, save the planet from those who are trying to destroy it now. So anyway, I ain't trying to, again, talk holes in nobody's head, but this lesson got me fired up.
Yes, sir.
Well, y'all ain't got nothing to say. I can go and keep talking now. I mean,
I had lost my train of thought. I had something, but I lost it. Give me a moment to come back.
Yes, sir. Yeah, man. I love everything about this lesson. It's so much, particularly when it comes to the section on the arguments for the UNIA. I mean, it's just the powerful, the songs, selected, the rituals, the opening of the organization, the being after church, where a lot of people are just coming from that particular service and they're in a certain mood, certain atmosphere. And the UNIA come through with the social, friendly, humanitarian, perspective and program. Oh man. And we wonder why today, because we don't operate the same way we were and should, why many of the churches aren't flocking toward the UNIA. The Black church has been a solid base for the Black community for a while. It's had its problems, but we used to be able to recruit whole churches at one given time. One fell swoop. Many of the ministers, etc. Were UNIA members and active, leaders in the organization. But how many, ministers? How many chaplains do we have in local divisions today? How many people are we really impacting in the way we used to? And still wonder why we don't have the millions of members that we once had. That's something to think about.
To my understanding, Brother Moore, in the readings of Robert Hill UNIA papers in the late 30s, it seemed to be that the church became an obstacle to the UNIA. I forgot who had mentioned it, but it was in the notes of either the 37 or 38 regional conference. that where they were mentioning how I guess just the difficulty to recruit through
that
the
was
church.
particular. They were talking about Father Divine, but
Okay.
that's because he, like some others, came out and said that he was God, and people were actually, kind of soaking that up a little too literal, and thought he was God Almighty in the flesh, and so the organization came out against that kind of piety, and wasn't a big fan of it, but not the church as a whole. But that particular movement, and a lot of, many of these people, just to be honest, because this is Harlem, the largest black community or city anywhere in the world, even throughout Africa and Brazil, anywhere. Harlem was at that time the largest black, city. So to have a 40,000 member division there, to have a whole block or two that's mostly all UNIA owned properties, businesses. I mean, everywhere they went, right next to the Black Star Line office, on 135th, next to the Liberty Hall on 138th, you had a Universal restaurant, you had millinery shop, you had the doll factory, you have all these institutions. The Phyllis Wheatley Hotel and the Booker T. Washington University. You got all, the whole block is pretty much tied up, several blocks long. Everything you do is going to be, Garvey had that kind of influence, so that when Mr. Garvey was physically off the scene, the next, hot shot young minister who come on the scene in New York and Harlem that has influence is going to take some of that excitement that Mr. Garvey generated and draw it toward himself, but he's drawing it again toward some less productive purposes. Normally just to make the church rich and do whatever. So there was naturally going to be some pull, from some of these types of individuals who came on the scene. Some of the Sufi Habibs and others who came. Some of them were more race first than others. Even 30, 40 years later, you look at if you look at the Black Panthers, for example, um, in California, which is closer to Asia and the communism and China and Russia and all that, the Black Panther Party was more communistic. Whereas in, say, Chicago, where they had the School of Social Work and all these sociology programs, they were a lot more social friendly, as far as feeding the children and homeless and all that sort of thing. And then if you look at the East Coast, the Black Panthers in New York, the Lumumba Shakur and all that crew, most of them were black nationalists, staunch, changing the names and the whole nine, because they were impacted by the Garvey movement's headquarters in Harlem for so long. So that anyway, Mr. Garvey's impact in New York is still resonating, and kept resonating even in the early days of hip hop. A lot of the people there were still speaking that conscious Melly Mel type of rap style, because that influence of Mr. Garvey is still thriving. The Stones are crying out with that kind of consciousness. So yeah, a lot of people were taking advantage of that. At certain other institutions, when Mr. Garvey was absent, they tried to make it seem like, oh well, Garvey's no longer here, but the Lord is directing you to me now. I'm the new leader, so come follow me. And so we weren't having that misdirection going on. So yeah, a lot of us were pretty upset about that. But I mean, the churches today, many of them don't even know their history, honestly. I mean, just like we talking about coming up in a couple weeks in Atlanta, the AME Church. How many giants in the AME were Garveyites? How many people, even who came before Mr. Garvey, like the 16th Bishop, Henry McNeil Turner, was talking about the blackness of God. Mr. Garvey was in some ways channeling that same spirit. You look at Bishop Reverdy Ransom, and he was talking about Garvey as the mightiest prophet of the age. You had a lot of these people who were observing the miracles that Mr. Garvey was accomplishing and seeing the direction, and they knew he had God's blessing, and so it was easy for them to back him up and support him all the way. And so many of the churches of that time, definitely came on wholesale. Even in D.C., they had a community right outside of D.C. called what's the North Deanwood, and they had one church in town. The church pastor was named Samuel Augustus Gordon Grant from Panama. Anyway, he was the president of all the UNIA divisions in D.C. They had 4 of them, and so he was the chair of the all the subdivisions. But he had a church right outside of DC in his black community, North Deanwood, and the official flag of North Deanwood was adopted in 1922 was the red, black, and green flag. So they had a whole community strong, thriving with the Garvey movement, right outside of Washington, and as well as in Washington. So that kind of impact, they call it the Harlem Renaissance. It really was the Garvey Renaissance all over the globe. That was, picking up, people. They were kind of centralized in Harlem. But, anyway, this is part of the history we're talking about of the UNIA's impact, doing things that people haven't really even documented yet and cited how impactful it was. And so, yeah, a lot of the churches that, if they knew their history and how closely they worked with the UNIA, there's quite a few churches in DC that were started by UNIA officers, like Sergeant Presbyterian over there in Northeast, amongst some other churches. But if they knew their history, they probably would gravitate back to their origins or to their the what came the source and force behind their growth, which was the Garvey movement. And Mr. Garvey's, philosophy is compatible with those teachings. So it's nothing to really to oppose. It's compatible with a whole lot of teachings if you believe in doing for self and kith and kin, to yourself be true and be false to no other man, charity start at home and all that good stuff. So it's just about reminding the church sometimes, or either looking at what the gospel of Garveyism, how it preached back in that time, and seeing how it still will be just as viable in this day and age as it was then. But yeah, the churches definitely will come our way if we don't look at them with some kind of derision that, oh, y'all sellouts and y'all are no good. And then, when people say, okay, well, let's leave the church. Then what you got for us? Huh? Um, well, well, we want to try to do something. Okay, well, you ain't got nothing for us. Then why you running us away from somebody who's feeding us, who got a credit union, who got, the clothing line, who got a, retirement shelter, daycare, and what you have, okay. So until you get it, leave that church alone. Let us learn to work with them and support, things they do that are righteous. And, yeah, I think our growth will begin to spark again, and they won't feel us as an opposing force to their teachings or their program. Let them do what they do. As long as it's race first, let them do what they do. They start preaching white Jesus, then we might have to, say something. but other than that, yeah, we can do more to show that we're not, the opposition to their endeavor.
Totally second that. Definitely. We just live in a very crazy, crazy time. I don't. Is there a time where the world hasn't been crazy? Before our time, during our time, maybe after our time. When is it gonna get better? When are we gonna have, one voice, one aim, one distance? When are we actually going to get there? And what's wild to me is that there's these numbers that have been floating around quite recently, which to me has been quite shocking. And I know that I've always known that us as African people have been the majority on this planet, but to the ratio of the numbers, it's just crazy. There is 7% Caucasians, seven. The rest is everybody else. So tell me, how is it that we live in a world that is dominated by them? I cannot get my head around that. What do we need to do? I mean, I know what we need to do, but how do we achieve getting all of our brothers and sisters to wake up and say, no, we're not doing this anymore. We're going to run this planet like it once was. We're going to restore what once was. We are going to follow through with what the Messiah Garvey came to do, and really go, oh, this man was brilliant. He was already hundreds of years ahead. He was already at the start of civilization and ahead at the same time. When are we going to wake up? Because this world doesn't work for us. We're not working for us. So I'm sorry if I'm off topic, by the way. Please feel free to stop me. But I just cannot understand and want to know what's the plan. I feel like we need a plan, a solid plan to make things, but at least if not for our generation, then for the generations that are coming up. Because the way that the world is I feel really sorry for the young people that are here, because what's it going to look like tomorrow, you know? And I'm also in a place of believing, I'm going to say this out loud with chest, that we need to stop having children until we get to a place where we have harmony and we have some kind of forwardness that we can do better for ourselves and our community and take back over the world in which we live and that was once rich with just our people. Apologies.
Yeah, or no, no apologies needed. But yeah, definitely. I hear you. I don't know about the. I've thought about it before though, so I can't say I don't sympathize with the not having children. I feel sorry for some of this generation of young men and women who got to find a spouse among some of this craziness. Uh,
Crazy. And
yeah,
it's not just the spouse, sorry to interrupt. It's
uh,
just the world that we live in. What are we leaving them into? What are we leading them into? It because to me, I don't see much hope. And all it just seems like things are getting worse. I understand things always tend to get worse before they get better. I get that. But
yeah,
if there's not even a plan in place, why are we leaving ourselves and our brothers and sisters to this? So, because what is this?
yeah,
I
yeah.
hope
Well,
that makes sense.
yeah, definitely. No, well, we have a plan that just need to be adopted by many of us, but many of us, again, our eyes are not open. We kind of, stuck on TikTok and internet and all the sources of misinformation is getting more of our attention than what is most needed. So we're being redirected, misdirected, oftentimes, and the plan is simple. It's just the people are complicated, and sometimes it's yeah, the conditions we're facing that we faced before, and we've tackled many of these problems before. But if again, if you don't know what you're capable of or what you've done,
Yeah.
then you're like a lion in the midst of a bunch of puppies who think you're a puppy too, and you don't know what your power is and what you're capable of. So you just go along and let other puppies bully you. When
Yeah.
you can rip all their heads off at one time. Once you know who you are, yeah, it's all over. But yeah, we don't understand who we are sometimes. So our job is really to wake everybody up out of this matrix as best as we can. And then when they're not satisfied with the way things are, then we can point them toward a program that works. And so something that's tried, tested, and true. Because when people ask me about the UNIA, that's the first thing I normally tell them is have because I've heard people since I was a child talk about when are black folks going to come together as a people. When we going to come together as a people? We need to come together as a people. And I let them know this is the time when we did come together as a people. Might not have been the entire race, but a significant portion, a solid vanguard number of people came together and pooled their ideas and thoughts and resources into one objective and accomplish things that blow your mind miraculously. And if we did it before, we can do it again. But we just gotta know that it's doable. And a lot of us just like I say, don't see the signs of hope. We think, we're over our head and, things, just continually, continuously declining and getting worse. And so, sometimes though, in that, 5 seconds before the miracle, some folks give up and give out. But yeah, we can't do that. We've seen, too much good happens. And Mr. Garvey's comments always encourage me that the tremendous odds of righteousness. Um, when you're doing good work, sometimes, yeah, good don't always come out of what you're trying to do. So sometimes you can do great hard work and still not succeed to the extent you want. But there's always those tremendous odds of righteousness. Even like if you look at World War I and II, those were byproducts of European greed. The Europeans were fighting over the spoils of Africa, and one thought the other was getting a little too much, and so they wind up going to blows and killing each other off, and which made Africa's opportunity a little stronger. African people worldwide. Then they wind up messing around and did it again. They weren't satisfied. So Germany and Belgium and everybody going to war, and it made them even weaker. And so then, when we started fighting for independence, they had, 40, 50 million less people to come and fight. And that's when their numbers started dwindling and our numbers started growing, and our opportunities to do things for self were so powerful. We were starting to elevate because of those tremendous odds of righteousness. We didn't make them go to war; they made themselves go to war. But them going to war is what made us strong. If we sat back and not just sit back, but we took advantage of the opportunities. So you don't know that what's going on with Ukraine or some other things may actually weaken Europe or America, or something to the point that Africans across the globe can be organizing and getting our stuff together now, so that when things go down, even if they don't go down, we're ready for some progress. But when things go down, then we're going to be the one holding the power. We got all the oil, all the gold, diamonds, coltan, the pedalites or whatever they call it, every uranium, everything in the world. We have all the animals, all the, agricultural lands and everything else we need to feed the planet. We got the power. So, when the music plays or music stops, we should be the ones in control and reverse the curse and flip the script on these folks who've been trying to colonize and destroy us for years, including China, and be the ones holding the power base on our motherland. But it just takes us, whatever small group that we have, build until we can attract more people to success. Because everybody loves success, So if it's 20 of us, and 20 of us can, produce something successful, then attract 20 more people. Oh man, how can I get with that? Y'all doing good. And then we got 20 more. That may attract 40 more people. Man, I like what y'all doing. How y'all get this going and get that going? Man, we need to do that over here. And before you know it, it's all over the globe. So it's just about us working where we are. As they say, think globally, act locally. But keep working together in spirit of pride, love, and confraternity, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it'll happen before you know it. We'll be basking in great success, doing things that we, a year or two before never thought was possible. But it's definitely possible. With a little bit of faith and some hard work, a little bit of inspiration and a lot of perspiration, we can accomplish anything we will.
Let's make it happen. Let's make it happen. I think we're
I think
past.
it's happening.
Do you?
Yeah.
How so? Just
Let
as
me.
examples.
Okay. In the first message to the world that Marcus Garvey shared with us after he was consigned to Atlanta Federal Penitentiary, he said that when we look at the history, we see a lot of people are afraid. They were concerned that Marcus Garvey was sent to Atlanta Federal Penitentiary to die. And in that first message, he tells us that if death has any real power, look for me in death to be the real Marcus Garvey I would like to be. And I see him being exactly what he said. And probably the clearest example of that is something that I know a lot of people are not aware of. Because usually when people hear the words, emancipate yourselves from mental slavery, none but ourselves can free the mind, of course they think about Bob Marley. But what most people don't realize is that Bob Marley was quoting Marcus Garvey. And when you look at the original video for Redemption Song, when Bob Marley says, we've got to fulfill the book, in the original video, the next thing you see is Marcus Garvey's picture. And I'm convinced that we have people who are so enamored of the mundane material world that it's almost as if the extraordinary spiritual world doesn't exist. And they don't seem to think that that has any influence over us. And I put it into the universe, well, what did Bob Marley mean by that? We've got to fulfill the book, because he showed us Marcus Garvey's picture. So that means the only book he could be talking about is not the Bible, but it's our Bible, the philosophy and opinions of Marcus Garvey. So what was he referring to? And, like I said, the extraordinary spiritual world, it operates. I've utilized it many, many different times. And in this instance, the thing that came to me was a quote that's in there from a little note that Marcus Garvey had that's originally it was in the Negro World, but it was also in the Black Man magazine, entitled Man, Know Thyself. And in there, he has this quote. He says, if 400 million Negroes get to know themselves, get to know that in them is a sovereign power, a power that is absolute. In the next 24 hours, you will see a new nation. You will see a new race. You will see an empire revived, not from the desires of others to see us rise, but from our own determination to rise, irrespective of what others may think. Now, I said before that in the original video of Redemption Song, when Bob Marley says, we've got to fulfill the book, he shows you Marcus Garvey's picture. If you went on the Bob Marley YouTube channel right now, you will not see that video. And they've only recently removed that video. They blocked it, at least in the United States of America. I don't know about other places, but in the US, when I go to that video, it says it's been blocked by the Universal Music Group. And they've only done that recently. And I know they've only done it since it's been revealed that when Bob Marley says, we've got to fulfill the book, he shows us Marcus Garvey's picture. So that's proof to me that there are people who think that they have got people convinced that they have power, but they're actually afraid. Because there's no reason for them to block that video, especially since you go on Bob Marley's YouTube channel, the exact same audio is on a different video. So there are people who see that the potential for us to do exactly what Marcus Garvey said, get to know ourselves. And it could happen in the next 24 hours. It could happen. You literally could have a global shift in human awareness like nothing that has happened in the last 5,000 years. It could happen just that fast. And I think that when you see people doing things like what the Universal Music Group did, blocking that video, they're concerned that that may cause it to happen. But in fact, they have no idea what may cause it to happen, because they've also you have people who have over 500,000 scholarly articles on Google Scholar involving melanin in some way, shape, form, or fashion. But it's been over 10 years since we first came to the realization that melanin is worth more than gold. You've never heard them say that because they're afraid that exactly what Marcus Garvey said will happen. When 400 million Negroes get to know themselves, imagine it. I mean, picture it right now. Every human being on this planet suddenly knows that melanin is worth more than gold. Imagine how people's thinking will change, how their behavior will change. Just the conversations that they have will be different. But even more so, this is the thing that I know, that when this becomes a well-known thing just amongst people on the African continent, it will be like night and day. At this moment, the Afrique, the official currency of the United States of Africa, is worth over $2. See, these are the types of things that I know people don't talk about them, as if somehow, if we realize these things, it'll be something good will happen. And it really does amaze me that we don't have people talking about that one simple thing. You know, if you have Marcus Garvey telling us, "Hail, United States of Africa," what will the currency of the United States of Africa be? And what will its value be? People aren't even talking about that, right? And it's such a simple thing. It's the same thing that was done in Europe with the euro. You take the value of each one of those currencies compared to another currency, and that is the value of the euro. The Afrique works the exact same way. And right this second, it's worth over $2. So if we want to see this thing that take place, all we have to do is tell the truth. We really don't have to do anything other than that, in my opinion.
Thank you for that, my brother. I appreciate that. And yeah, I do understand that things do take time, but I guess it's about things chipping away slowly and, noticing where we've come from and where we are now and keeping the faith in that. But it is just very frustrating. But thank you for those words. It was encouragement. I
Well,
think maybe that needs to be said louder. Said louder so that, more people are hearing that and feel encouraged that things are moving, that we can keep things moving.
Yeah, I think a lot of things you see today around the globe is there's a certain eventuality that I think most people, world leaders, and others know is coming. Um, I think there used to be a saying back in the day: "Fear of a black planet is real," and the growing darker peoples of the world, are growing in many ways, technologically, scientifically, et cetera, et cetera. And the uh, Europeans and those who continue to clash and fight and go through their gyrations, um, are starting to lose more than they care to admit. And so they starting to get a little more desperate. It's kind of like they say the devil's time is coming is close to being over, and so he's getting more desperate. I can see what's going on in Israel, what's going on in Ukraine, and what's going on in other countries around the globe. That they're trying to cut off this and cut these people off and cut the AI, aid, U.S. aid, and all this stuff, and trying to run people out the country because they're white privilege, the white supremacist myth is about to get totally debunked. And I think Donald Trump is the biggest myth debunker of them all. Not only his ignorance, but his ineptitude is going to cause America to lose a whole lot. These fake trade wars and nonsense that they're creating. You can't hide behind nuclear bombs forever. So there's a desperation that you can sense. It reminds me of Mr. Garvey once said about, if we were so inferior as folks pretend that we are, or as they claim that we are, then why would you do something to try to stop us from doing the things that we do? If we were inferior, we'd fail on our own. We know we just naturally would not succeed in doing anything. But if we about to run a race and you have to take a bat and hit me upside my knee with it, then that means you knew I was going to whoop you behind in that race if you didn't do that. So it's kind of only encouraging me to see that they do know what's going on and know that they really can't stop it. They can try to stymie it a little bit, but they can't stop the inevitable. We back on the rise, and certain things has been set in motion. They're not big enough and strong enough to defeat. They'll just try to misdirect everybody. But yeah, I think there's a spirit in the air. The natural mystic, as Bob would say. So yeah, black folks are growing and expanding and getting stronger by the day. Doing push-ups in soft sand and the whole nine. So yeah, it's just a matter of organizing this so that as Mr. Garvey said, if we want justice, we got to be strong. If we want to be strong, we got to come together. And if we got to come together, we can only do so through the system of organization. And that organization is the UNIA, greatest movement for improvement to ever grace our race. Founded by the master architect and chief engineer, the most comprehensive blueprint for Black Power ever designed and constructed. The most honorable, unconquerable, indomitable, and incomparable Marcus Mosiah Garvey. And Sister Lee left the conversation. Oh, okay, yeah, she's not here anymore. Yeah, I wanted to hear from her, but who knows? Maybe we'll hear next week as we continue part 2 of the lesson on history. But yeah, Mr. Garvey laid this thing out perfectly, and some of these different, because I guess people don't understand the history of the times. How the association calls all Negroes to recognize their common origin as Africans and their African descent. Many people don't know that UNIA did that, and they think it's just kind of been like that, or in the 1960s or something, we came up with that realization. But yeah, a lot of us didn't think we had that connection going on, but we were forced to that realization because of the UNIA's program. And it definitely caused other nations to respect our national aspirations, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, even before Malcolm was talking about going to the League of Nations, Mr. Sherrill went to the League of Nations. Mr. Sherrill was going to the United Nations, or went to the United Nations. Mr. Sherrill went to Ghana's inauguration and met with some different leaders of Africa and was planning to go to the succeeding conference in 1958, the Convention of Independent African States, where the red, black, and green flag was adopted. Those tricolors were recommended for all, newly independent states at that time. But at the same time, Cheryl was there at the inauguration when Kwame Nkrumah had mentioned that he wished Mr. Garvey was there to see his work come to fruition. But since he wasn't there, they were going to recognize him nonetheless. And they were, of course, in Black Star Plaza with a black star in their newly, adopted flag. And eventually he wound up giving a black, I know a minister like this part. Kwame Nkrumah eventually gave the Star of African Redemption, I think it was, or the Black Star of African Redemption, something like that, as an official medal to Emperor Haile Selassie back in 1960, after Ezekwe became president of Nigeria, who was another staunch Garveyite. So anyway, even the Kenyan flag, I think it was in 1950 when Jomo Kenyatta headed the Kenyan African Union, that he adopted the red, black, and green flag as the official flag before they modified it a little bit. But the spirit of Garveyism was just everywhere in Africa, pushing and motivating and driving the communities together. And to have people like even Hastings Banda, to have the Mugabes and the Sam Nujomas and people of the world who were staunch, declared, Garveyites, meeting with President General Sherrill and others. These were some major events that were taking place that some of us don't know because we don't know that history. And so, we think certain things happen by accident, but none of this stuff was an accident. This was all part of a serious, deliberate plan, an intricate plan. And it's, fruit is just, bearing itself later on at different times. And some of us don't connect it. But once you connect it to see what the source was again, then you know how to regenerate that source and produce the same type of great works. Yeah, it's over.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, see, like we got about 10 minutes left. Anybody want to make some closing remarks on this first half of the lesson and blessing of the course of African philosophy and arguments for continuation, perpetuation, and support of the UNIA? And that's a powerful combination of words there. An argument to continue. This is our ethical justification for continuing, and to perpetuity, the association, as well as offering support for it. That's what we should bear in mind when we produce literature. Things that argue why the UNIA is necessary, why we must continue and support and perpetuate it. But yeah, this argument he laid out, I love it.
Yeah, just briefly closing comments for myself. Just flipping through the lesson. I guess a good closing summary takeaway for me. It's a paragraph on page 177. It says, "Never cease in your efforts to influence a Negro to join the association until he has joined. So long as he stays out of the UNIA, the work of uniting all the Negroes cannot be accomplished. Always remember that you are a missionary for the cause of the association. So lose no opportunity that may present itself to make converts for the association." So we must take that as a directive for us in this time. That's all I have. Thank you, Brother President General Moyama.
Oh yes, sir. Fine. Closing comment too. Yeah, that's something that I wish we could appreciate more and more, because the experience of organizing and recruiting and teaching is something that we must do, but everybody's not comfortable in doing it. Everybody doesn't feel so compelled to do it. And just like when I was in the Jehovah's Witness, there's a lot of people who got turned off by somebody saying you need to go house to house and door to door. Like, what? I ain't no salesman. Nah, I ain't doing that. And it's just uncomfortable. It's not something naturally people just get up and do. But when you feel that what you have to say is that important and that it's necessary to save not only yourself but your community and people who have no clue as to what's going on, and it has to be said. And why not have more people of like minds in your neighborhood, right next door to you in your community? And that's more people you can rely on if things go down. Why wouldn't you want to share this good news with them? Why, if you really promote the spirit of pride and love, everybody needs to have this information. So there needs to be a sense of urgency when it comes to recruiting, not just those who we click up with or those we went to school with or those who we already talking to who got some degree of consciousness we met on Facebook, but to those who we haven't met yet, to the guy who living on the street, to the sister in the cheese line, to the brother in the university, to the sister literally next door, and to the family down the street, this church and that mosque and everybody else. Every member of the race, in the community needs to have knowledge. At least if they don't use the knowledge, that's on them. But we should try everything we can to bring every single member in. And if we don't, that one person you don't like or whatever is stopping us from having true success and getting every member of the race into this movement. Everybody's not going to be an officer. Everybody's not going to lead. Everybody's not going to be that, figure. But yeah, everybody should be a dues paying, card carrying, conscientious, member of the association. So yeah, that's a powerful kind of a charge there to never cease and until we have every single member of the race in this association. That's a lot of work to be done. So let us try to prepare ourselves to honor that edict and carry it out. And it just works better for us in the end, truth be told.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Reminds me of somebody said that charity is like casting bread upon the waters doing charity for the race is like casting bread upon the waters to come back to you at a later time.
That's right. That's right. Yes, sir. Anybody else closing thoughts.
You said something, and then I got distracted and I forgot what I was going to say now.
Next time, just tell me shut up right there. Shut up, shut up, shut up, shut
No,
up, shut
no,
up.
no. It was it was very valid. I've just it's got out of my head. I'm multitasking, so apologies. I can't. If it comes back to me, I'll come back on. Sorry, I
Uh,
wasn't.
are you cooking again?
Nah, not today.
Okay.
Not today. I've got tons of other things to do, but no, not today.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Um, yeah,
Oh, that was
but
it. I remembered. So, the whole recruitment thing, because that is my territory. I mean, it's part of my day job and just part of my character anyway.
mm,
But also, it just made me think that is that the way forward? Because it's all well and good that we go door to door or we do rallies or what have you, and I think that whatever we do, we always have to do something. But also, it's about getting people in the organization that are actually going to be active you know
right.
um and I guess you're always going to have a portion of people that always have good intentions and they want to join us, and they believe in the cause and what have you, but they either get disheartened, get lost in life. So it's how do we have enough people that there's a core. So for example, they usually have 10% are more likely to do something out of whatever number you have. So we need to have enough numbers, but that 10% will cover the tasks of everybody. Does that make sense? So it's like, how do we make sure that happens? I don't know if it's something that's just ongoing or something that has to be done in a very big way, or if it's just little, we just keep going every time. But I guess what I'm getting at is having authentic people that want to do the work and enough people that can carry through with everybody else to encourage them all to keep going, if that makes sense.
Yes, yeah, yeah. Well, once an officer, particularly now, it doesn't have to be all officers ultimately, but once an officer has been trained in UNIA, not only the program but also how to defend the program and how to uh, advocate the program and the philosophy and et cetera, how to, listen and dialogue, et cetera, with some things, like you said, you may instinctively already have that skill set, as a people person. But once you have that, and some literature helps, having literature that they can read in their spare time if they can't listen to you fully at the moment. Some people, if you were to go house to house, door to door, or just on the street corner, a busy traffic area, and pass out people while they at the bus stop or wherever. If you were to have some literature and they don't have time, they about to get on the bus, you say, okay, well, read this, check it out if you like it. We meet every first and third Sunday. This location, that's on the literature, and hopefully I'll see you soon, and just pass it out, have a good word, meet some people, et cetera. To know everybody in your community, and more importantly, to have them know you is the first step toward, having that kind of sense of community, and, the conversations that you want to be held out there. So, I mean, I'm working actually on some formalized literature. I just need a little more assistance with the graphics. But once we have some of that, and people would, go through the material and know how to approach. And there's some different topics and rebuttals and things that I think we would do well to actually formally have a discussion on in the community, so that when someone say, "Oh man, I ain't lose nothing in Africa," or something crazy, you have a healthy, reasoned, intelligent response, so that you don't know not act as if you don't know how to handle it, or get angry or something else. Same way, like when I was Jehovah's Witness, we had a book called Reasoning from the Scriptures, and so if we were to argue against the Trinity, and we know people are going to argue, well, I believe in the Trinity because of A, B, C, and D, then we had a counter argument ready. Well, I understand that, but if you look at this, then this kind of defeats that purpose. So if they were going to argue about holidays or the blood, consumption or whatever. Okay, this is our argument according to the Bible. Blah 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 blah. So the same way, when we talk to the community about coming together. Oh man, these niggas ain't gonna come together and do nothing. Well, here's our response. Well, what if we say, this, that, and the other? Y'all accepting white folks too? Well, we don't believe in this, and this is our response. But once we have it kind of down packed on how to interact, comfortably and win the people over, yeah, then that needs to spread. Division needs to have that kind of local organizer that can facilitate that kind of teaching or lesson. But it's just a matter of us putting the structure together, and then going out in the field. Go out during festivals and holidays. That's one thing about having a Black Cross nurse, contingent or auxiliary battle. If you had just a Black Cross nursing unit and people were interested in first aid, CPR, Narcan, whatever health benefits they can get from yoga, teach them how to make tonics or whatever. You can have a cheap $300 fold up, tent, like a little military tent with a Black Cross on the outside and a couple tables outside. And during a big festival, if it gets hot out there, you can have, a couple fans, a little cooling station with some water in the inside. Somebody gets hurt, fighting, stabbed, whatever. You can tell them, hey, sit them down, relax, and we'll stabilize them the best we can until the emergency services get there and they can treat them. They'll know by looking at our little triage over here that this is a place to come. And now you get known in the community, for serving the people and giving out food, or, et cetera, et cetera. But all these little acts, are part of the pitch to the program or the appeal to the program. So a lot of things can be done, but definitely have to have something organized in order to be more effective.
Well,
Definitely.
I know that I never actively recruited Moriama to join the UNIA, but I talked about Marcus Garvey and the UNIA so much, he had to come and be part of it. And one thing I noticed is that you have to have the right people in the right positions. You can't put people in positions that they are not ready for. For instance, Henrietta Vinton Davis. She was the UNIA international organizer. And it's literally like she was preparing for that role her entire life. Everything she was doing as an international organizer for the UNIA, she did to build her career as an actress, elocutionist, and dramatic reader. So if you have people in positions where they're supposed to carry out certain tasks and they don't have experience fulfilling that role, well, then you're going to get the results that you got, where you have people, who are going door to door when they shouldn't be. They should be doing something else. So if it's not a person, if you have somebody going door to door, and maybe they have other skills that they should be using, doing graphics, like Moriama just mentioned. They shouldn't be going door to door. They should be doing the graphics for Moriama. Then that person shouldn't be going door to door. So if somebody's role is not to go door to door and saying, hey, come join the UNIA, well, what is their role? It may not be that they go door to door. They may be a musician. They should be recording, producing a recording of the Universal Ethiopian hymnal using an orchestra. We don't know. People's roles are different. So if your role is not to go door to door, inviting people to join the UNIA, well, what are you good at? What is it that you should be doing? That's my take on that.
Hey, good word. Unfortunately, our time has come to an end. We reached the 2-hour mark, and so we're gonna have to resume the conversation next week. But anyway, I'd like to thank everybody who came out. I guess everybody had an opportunity to share some thoughts and ideas around this important topic, and I appreciate everybody's contribution. It's been a great program. And if I may, I'll close out now with a word from Mr. Garvey and the motto of the organization. The word, I'm going to use for Mr. Garvey today is history records that slaves, by virtue of their experiences and the knowledge gained in captivity in strange lands, have eventually become masters of themselves. Let us, therefore, use adversity as others have done. Take advantage of every opportunity. Whether there is none, make it for yourself. Where there is none, make it for yourself. And let history record that as we toiled laboriously and courageously, we work to live gloriously. And with that being said, I'd like to close with the motto of the association. You all are welcome to stand and put your fist in the air and take it off mute if you like. You can repeat after me. One God,
One God,
one aim,
one aim,
one destiny.
one destiny.
Thank you all for coming on. Good night, good afternoon, and yes, good morning to some.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
brother.
you for hosting. Thank you. And to everybody else.
Yeah.